A woman is sitting at her kitchen table, tears streaming down her face, but they are tears of pure joy. She is shaking. She can barely breathe. She keeps looking at the lottery ticket in her hand, then back at the television screen, then back at the ticket again. The numbers match. Every single one of them. After years of working double shifts, after years of counting coins just to buy groceries, after years of praying for just one break. This is it. This is the moment everything changes. She picks up the phone and calls the man she loves. She tells him they are going to be okay. She tells him their lives are about to begin. He sounds happy. He sounds excited. But somewhere behind his voice, something else is already starting to grow. Something dark. Something dangerous. Something that will cost her everything. 3 months from this moment, she will be dead. And the man she called first, the man she trusted with her joy, her money, and her future, will be the one who takes her life. So how does a lottery win become a death sentence? How does a dream become a nightmare that ends in murder? Stay with me, because what happened to her will stay with you forever. Her name was Crayla Alvarado. She was a woman who knew what it meant to struggle. She was not famous. She was not wealthy. She was not the kind of person whose name appeared in newspapers, at least not for good reasons. Before the lottery changed everything, she was just a regular woman trying to hold her life together in a world that rarely made things easy. She lived in a small home with modest walls and even more modest dreams. She worked long hours. She took care of her family. She did what millions of people do every single day. She survived, and she did it with grace. Crayla grew up understanding that money was not something that came easily. She had seen hard times. She had felt the weight of financial pressure pushing down on her shoulders, the way it does when you check your bank account and feel your stomach drop. She knew what it meant to sacrifice. She knew what it meant to go without. And yet, through all of that, she remained someone who believed that things could get better. She kept going. She kept hoping. That hope is what made her buy that ticket. The people who knew Crayla described her as warm. They said she had a smile that made a room feel lighter. She was the kind of woman who remembered your birthday, who asked how your kids were doing, who showed up when you needed someone. She was not perfect. No one is. But she was real. She was deeply human. And she deserved so much more than what life was about to give her. She had a boyfriend. His name was Ronnie Music Jr., and that name will mean something very different by the end of this story. Ronnie was a part of her life before the money came. He was there during the struggle. He knew the Crayla who clipped coupons and worried about bills. He knew the woman before the millions. And in those early days, perhaps he loved her, or at least something close to it. But love and money have a complicated relationship. And when the money arrived, everything that was complicated became dangerous. Now imagine it is an ordinary afternoon. Nothing about the day feels special. Crayla does what she has done many times before. She buys a lottery ticket. Maybe she does it out of habit. Maybe she does it because she always believed, somewhere deep inside, that one day her numbers would come up. She scratches the ticket, or she watches the draw, and something impossible happens. The numbers are hers. Every single one. $1.3 million. Not a small prize. Not a consolation. A life-changing, jaw-dropping, breathtaking amount of money. $1.3 million with her name on it. The moment she realizes what has happened, the world shifts. It does not just shift for her. It shifts for everyone around her. That is the thing about sudden wealth that nobody warns you about. The money does not just change your bank account. It changes the air around you. It changes the way people look at you. It changes the dynamic of every relationship you have, whether you want it to or not. And for Crayla, that shift would begin immediately. She claimed her winnings. She went through the process that every lottery winner goes through. The verification, the paperwork, the meetings with officials, the moment the check becomes real. And then the money was hers. $1.3 million, sitting in her account, waiting to reshape her world. She had plans. Of course she had plans. What would you do? What would any of us do after a lifetime of struggle, after all those years of going without? You would dream. You would plan. You would think about everything you could finally fix, finally do, finally become. Crayla wanted security. She wanted comfort. She wanted to take care of the people she loved. She wanted a future that did not feel like a constant battle. Those are not greedy dreams. Those are human dreams. Those are the dreams that every single one of us carries somewhere in the back of our minds when we buy a lottery ticket and whisper, just maybe. She had finally won. And for a moment, just a moment, Everything felt like it was going to be all right. But money reveals people. That is one of the most painful truths about sudden wealth. It does not change who people are. It uncovers who they already were. And the people in Crayla's life were about to be uncovered in ways she never expected. Ronnie Music Jr. was one of them. In the beginning, after the win, things probably felt electric. There is a kind of euphoria that comes with that kind of money. Suddenly you can say yes to things you always said no to. Suddenly the weight lifts. Suddenly you can breathe. And that feeling, that rush of freedom and possibility, it is intoxicating. For Crayla, it must have felt like a long-awaited exhale. Like the universe had finally turned toward her. Like the hard years were behind her. But watch closely, because this is where the story begins to crack. When money enters a relationship that was built during hard times, it can expose every fault line that was always there but hidden under the weight of survival. Stress bonds people. Shared struggle creates closeness. But remove the struggle, and suddenly you see each other clearly. Sometimes what you see is beautiful. Sometimes what you see is terrifying. For Crayla and Ronnie, what emerged from beneath the surface of their relationship was something deeply, lethally dangerous. Ronnie Music Jr. had a history. He was not a man without shadows. Before Crayla's win, he had his own story, one that did not reflect the kind of character you would want standing next to someone holding over $1 million. The details of his past were the kind that should have raised flags. But love has a way of softening our vision. And when you love someone, you see the version of them you hope they are, not always the version they truly are. As the money settled into their lives, Ronnie's behavior began to shift. It started subtly, the way these things always do. Maybe it was the way he talked about the money. Maybe it was the way he started making suggestions about how it should be spent. Maybe it was the growing tension between what Crayla wanted for herself and what Ronnie wanted for himself. The line between a partner and a threat is not always obvious when you are living inside the relationship. From the outside, the signs are clear. From the inside, they look like love. Money changes the power in a relationship. It always does. When one person suddenly has something that the other person wants, or needs, or resents, or feels entitled to, the balance tips. And when that balance tips in a relationship that already has cracks, things can escalate with terrifying speed. Crayla had the money. Crayla had the control. And for a certain kind of man, that is unbearable. There is a particular cruelty in what happened next. Because Crayla was not a woman who flaunted her wealth or used it as a weapon. She was not trying to overpower anyone. She was just a woman who had finally gotten a break, trying to figure out how to make the most of it. She did not deserve what was coming. Nobody does. But the lottery does not protect you from the people around you. And sometimes, the very act of winning puts you in danger. 3 months. That is all the time she had. 3 months between the moment her numbers came up and the moment her life ended. Think about that. 90 days, give or take, between a dream and a tragedy. Between a lottery ticket and a funeral. Between the best moment of her life and the worst thing that could ever happen. 3 months is not very long. It is barely enough time to adjust to a new reality, let alone see the danger closing in around you. The situation between Crayla and Ronnie deteriorated. Arguments escalated. The tension that had been quietly building beneath the surface of their relationship began to erupt. The money, the thing that was supposed to bring happiness, became a source of conflict so intense that it turned deadly. Ronnie Music Jr. murdered Crayla Alvarado. He took her life. The woman who had just won over $1 million, the woman who had dreams and plans, and people who loved her, was killed by the man she had trusted enough to call first when her ticket came in. The details of the murder are not just horrifying, they are heartbreaking. Because every detail circles back to the same unbearable truth. She was not a stranger to him. She was not a target he did not know. She was someone he had shared a life with. Someone who had let him in. Someone who had probably hoped that the money would make things better between them, not worse. The betrayal was as deep as it gets. He did not just take her life. He destroyed everything she had worked toward, everything she had hoped for, and every dream she had finally been given the means to pursue. Law enforcement investigated the case. The facts came out slowly, painfully, the way they always do in cases like this. Ronnie Music Jr. was connected to her death. The motive was tied to the money. It almost always is. When investigators look at the case, what emerges is a story that is sadly not unique in its shape. A sudden windfall, a volatile relationship, escalating conflict, and a devastating, irreversible end. What makes Crayla's story unique is her warmth, her hope, her humanity. The woman who smiled and asked how your kids were doing. Gone. The people who knew Crayla were shattered. When you lose someone you love to violence, there is a specific kind of grief that comes with it. It is not just the loss. It is the anger. It is the knowledge that this did not have to happen, that she should still be here, that somewhere in the chain of events, something could have been different. A different relationship, a different decision, a different day. But grief is not built on what could have been. It is built on what is. And what is that she is gone. Her family had to watch the dream turn into a nightmare in real time. First the joy, a call telling them she had won. And then, just months later, the worst call you can ever receive. The call that changes your family forever. The call that splits your life into before and after. Her loved ones had to grieve not just her death, but the cruelty of the timing. The universe had given her something extraordinary, and then it had been stolen, not by fate, not by illness, not by accident, but by a deliberate, violent act committed by someone who should have protected her. Ronnie Music Jr. faced justice. He was charged with her murder. The legal process ran its course, the way it does, slowly, painfully, with every detail of the crime laid out in courtrooms and official records. He was held accountable. But accountability, as any family member of a murder victim will tell you, is not the same as healing. You can lock away the person who did it. You cannot give back what he took. You cannot undo the 3 months. You cannot uncash the lottery ticket and send her back to the life she had before, the humble, struggling life that was at least a life. The money, the $1.3 million that was supposed to change everything, became part of the tragedy. It was not just a backdrop. It was the trigger. It was the thing that shifted the dynamic, that escalated the tension, that turned a dangerous man into a lethal one. The lottery prize did not give Crayla the new life she deserved. It gave her a countdown. And that is one of the most devastating things about this story. The very thing she won is the thing that led to her losing everything. Picture what her final months looked like. Somewhere in those 90 days, she was happy. She must have been. She had $1.3 million. She had plans. She had dreams that were suddenly within reach. She probably went to sleep some nights thinking about what she was going to do with her life. Maybe she imagined a house. Maybe she imagined helping her family. Maybe she imagined a version of herself that was finally free from the financial worry that had followed her for so long. Those moments of hope were real. Those moments were hers. And nobody can take them away, not even what came next. But also somewhere in those 90 days, the fear must have crept in. Relationships have a temperature, and you can feel when it drops. You can feel when the person beside you starts looking at you differently. When conversations shift. When the warmth disappears and something colder takes its place. Did Crayla feel it coming? Did she sense the danger? We will never know. She cannot tell us. But what we do know is that the warning signs were there. In Ronnie's history, in the pattern of behavior, in the escalating tension between two people whose relationship could not survive the pressure that the money created. This is the moment in the story where we have to stop and sit with the weight of what happened. Because it is easy to tell a story like this as a sequence of events. Win, conflict, murder. It is easy to let the facts carry you through without feeling the full humanity of what was lost. But Crayla was a person. A real, warm, specific, irreplaceable person. She had a laugh. She had a favorite meal. She had things she worried about and things that made her happy. She had a voice that called people she loved. She had hands that held that lottery ticket and shook with joy. She was real. And she deserved better. She deserved so much better. There is a question that hangs over every lottery tragedy story, and it is the hardest one to answer. Would she have been safer if she had never won? It is an impossible thing to sit with. Because on one hand, yes, perhaps the money was the catalyst that turned a dangerous situation deadly. Perhaps without $1.3 million in the picture, the relationship would have continued, troubled but not fatal. But on the other hand, the danger was already there. Ronnie Music Jr. was already who he was. The money did not create a monster. It revealed one. And sometimes, the revealing happens before you have a chance to get away. Now let us talk about why this happens. Because Crayla's story is heartbreaking, but it is not isolated. Every year, lottery winners around the world find themselves in danger, not from strangers, but from the people closest to them. The people they trusted. The people they loved. And understanding why this happens is not just an academic exercise. It is a matter of life and death. When someone suddenly receives a large sum of money, the psychological impact on the people around them can be profound and sometimes violent. There is something called sudden wealth syndrome, and it does not just affect the winner. It affects everyone in their circle. Partners, family members, friends. Everyone has to suddenly reckon with a new reality, a new power dynamic, a new version of the person they thought they knew. And for people who already have unstable personalities, controlling tendencies, or histories of violence, that reckoning can trigger something dark. Ronnie Music Jr. represents something that we need to talk about openly. He represents the danger of being a woman who suddenly has something that a controlling partner wants. Money is power. And when a woman gains power in a relationship where the man already had issues with control, the result can be explosive. Abusers do not respond well to power shifts. They do not gracefully step back and let their partners lead. They escalate. They threaten. They destroy. And in the worst cases, in cases like Crayla's, they kill. But let us not reduce Crayla to a cautionary tale about relationships. She was more than that. She was a woman who fought hard for everything she had, who worked long hours and held on through difficult years, who had enough hope left inside her to buy a lottery ticket and believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. She had that hope. She had that belief. And it is not her fault that the person standing beside her was not the person he appeared to be. The fault lies entirely with him. The lesson in her story is not that lottery winners are doomed. The lesson is that sudden money does not transform people. It reveals them. It strips away the layers that financial stress puts on relationships and shows you who someone really is when the rules change. And it is a reminder, a painful, urgent reminder, that before you share your winnings, you must first know who you are sharing them with. Not who you hope they are. Not who they were when things were hard. Who they actually are. Think about what Crayla's family carries. They carry the grief of her death, yes. But they also carry something else, the bittersweet memory of the joy that came just before. They remember the call. They remember her voice when she said the numbers matched. They remember what it felt like to believe that everything was going to get better. And then they carry the silence that came after. The funeral. The courtroom. The life that was supposed to start, but instead ended before it could begin. That is a weight that does not have a name. It is heavier than sadness. It sits somewhere between grief and outrage and a love that has nowhere left to go. Imagine being her mother. Imagine being her child. Imagine being her closest friend. Imagine hearing that she won, feeling that rush of hope and happiness for her, and then 3 months later getting the call that she is gone. Imagine the way joy can turn to ash that fast. Imagine the way one phone call can erase another. That is what her people live with. Every single day. The memory of her voice when everything was bright, and the knowledge of what happened when the light went out. There are people in this world who will hear Crayla's story and think, that could never happen to me. And I understand that thought. We all need to believe we are safe. We all need to believe that the people we love are who we think they are. But Crayla thought the same thing. She had no reason to believe that the man she called first, the man she trusted with her news, her hope, her future, would become the man who ended her life. She had no reason to see it coming. And that is the most terrifying part of this story. It was not obvious. It never is. So what do we take from her story? What do we carry forward from the tragedy of Crayla Alvarado, the woman who won $1.3 million and was murdered 3 months later by the man she loved? We take her name. We say it. We remember it. We do not let her become just a headline, just a cautionary tale, just a statistic in the long and painful list of lottery tragedies. She was a person, a specific, beloved, irreplaceable person, and her story deserves to be told with the full weight of that truth. We take the awareness. We talk about the very real dangers that come with sudden wealth, not to scare people away from winning, but to make sure that if the moment ever comes, people are prepared. Prepared to slow down. Prepared to look clearly at the people around them. Prepared to protect themselves before they trust, before they share, before they let the euphoria of winning blind them to the reality of who is standing beside them. Wealth management experts will tell you to wait before you make any decisions after a win. Take a breath. Get advice. Look at your relationships with clear eyes. Crayla's story shows why that advice is not just financial, it is about survival. We take the understanding that love is not always what it looks like. That people who have been with us through hard times are not automatically people who deserve to be with us through good times. That history with someone does not guarantee safety. That sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you call first when something good happens, because they are already inside your defenses, already trusted, already close enough to do real damage. And we take her spirit, because before everything happened, she had something that is genuinely beautiful and genuinely rare. She had hope. She had the kind of hope that keeps a person buying lottery tickets when logic says don't bother. She had the kind of hope that gets you through long shifts and tight budgets and years of going without. She had hope, and for a moment, for one shining, electric, tear-soaked moment, that hope paid off. The numbers matched. Her ship came in. The universe said yes. And she felt what it felt like to win. Nobody can take that moment from her. It happened. It was real. She deserved it. The tragedy is not that she hoped. The tragedy is that someone who should have celebrated her instead chose to destroy her. The tragedy is the 3 months. The tragedy is the unanswered question of what her life could have looked like, the house she might have bought, the family members she might have helped, the version of herself she might have finally been able to become without the weight of financial worry pressing down on her. That version of Crayla, the free one, the safe one, the one who got to enjoy what she had won. That version deserved to exist. And she was taken before she could. Rest in peace, Crayla Alvarado. You won. And we remember you. Not as a tragedy, not as a warning, but as a woman who had hope, who kept going, and who, for one beautiful, brief moment, held the whole dream in her hands. You deserved every second of joy that ticket gave you. And you deserved a lifetime more. The world was not kind enough to give you that. But your story, the full, human, painful, hopeful truth of it, will not be forgotten. Because as long as we tell it, you are still here. You are still the woman with the smile that made a room feel lighter. You are still the one who remembered birthdays and asked how your kids were doing. You are still real. And you always will be. If there is one thing I want you to carry out of this video, let it be this. Money changes everything. But it does not always change things for the better. What it does, always, without fail, is reveal the truth. The truth about your circumstances. The truth about your choices. And most of all, the truth about the people around you. Before you share your winnings, know who you are sharing them with. Look clearly. Look honestly. Because sometimes the greatest danger does not come from strangers. It comes from the person whose number you dial the moment your dreams come true. Stay safe. And never stop hoping. Just make sure you know who is standing beside you when the dream finally arrives.